I don't often create with a limited palette, but when I do, I love the results. Come see how this one came together. Hello and welcome. This is Betty with Betty Franks Art. So happy that you're joining me here today. I'm doing a quick flip through of my art journal, and it's actually a sketchbook journal, I guess we can call it that. I will include a link down below on how you can get your hands on your own sketchbook journal. I love the size of this journal. It is small enough that I can create something fairly quickly, and it is also the pages of it I love because they're kind of like watercolor paper. They are watercolor pages, and they can handle a lot of medium being put on them. So I started off with putting down gesso, and now I let that dry, and now these are the three colors, well, two colors plus black and white that I'm using today. So the blue green and the cadmium medium yellow by Nova Color Paints. I'll also include a link down below for Nova Color Paints because I love their paints. All right, so I kind of stopped here because I don't know where my head was. I forgot to start with my usual mark making. So I went back and grabbed a whole bunch of different colors. I usually like to start with a pencil. There, I didn't start with a pencil, and then I grabbed a pencil. And then I like to use crayons and let's see what else. The Stabilo Woodies. So down below this video, there will be a link to all of my favorite art supplies so you could check those out. Now, when I put down the layer of gesso, I also scratched into the surface so that I can start creating texture right away. And then when I put down the black paint, I also like to start making texture right away. So I just flipped my brush around and started and scratched right into that wet so that I can build up some texture. And then instead of washing my brush right away, I ended up dipping into the white, which is gesso for me. I like to use gesso as my white, and that created some gray paint for me. Here I'm going to spread out the blue-green. I love this blue-green. It is just a fabulous color. And here, instead of using a paintbrush, I started off with a palette knife. And there, again, you see me scratching right into it. Now, I love the palette knife because it is a lot more freer and I have less control over it. So it allows me to be a whole lot more loose. So I really enjoyed playing around in this journal or this sketchbook page by just starting off with my palette knife there. Now I'm going to switch over to yellow. Now, when you're doing a limited palette, honestly, any color plus yellow are probably two great colors to go with because, as you know, yellow mixes very well with other colors. And in this case, since I've got a blue-green, it's going to make a wonderful green color, especially if I add some more white to it. Now here I grabbed a small brush. I'm going to guess it's probably like a size 4 round brush. I'm not really sure. But because I'm working so small, I wanted to grab a really small brush. Of course, when I'm working large on canvas, then I'm using my larger brushes, which tend to be like a 12 or a 14. And I like to use either a flat brush, a round brush, or a filbert. Honestly, I have a variety of all of them because they create different types of marks for me in terms of, when I put down paint. So I like, using all of them. All right, so just a moment there, I was using a toothpick to, again, go in and make some more interesting texture just by scratching in everywhere. And I like doing that when the paint is still wet. Here I've created another color of a kind of a yellow-green, I guess you can say. So as you can see, I really like mixing my colors as I go. And by doing that, it helps create some harmony with my colors. So this brush size is really great for this size of paper, again, because I'm working so small. I don't like to use the really big brushes because I feel like I put down one mark and I've covered half the page. So using a small brush really works for me. Now here I've grabbed a different one. This is called a rigger or a script brush, and love using it. It's important that you get it wet because it'll be easier to move that paint around. And this makes some really nice fine lines for me. Now I guess the other one that I'm holding in my left hand would do the same, but with this one, with the bristles being so long, I feel like it's a little bit easier for me to make these finer lines. Making another pot of color there. And it's probably the reason why I have 4 mil plastic, so the number 4 mil, M-I-L, plastic on my entire table. This is a table that I got for free that was sitting on somebody's front yard that they were getting rid of. And it's a really nice table. However, I can see that kids were doing all kinds of crafting on them because there was all kinds of glitter glue stuck to the top of it. So, but that didn't bother me. So what I did was, it was a black table. I brought it home, set it up, and scraped off as much as I could. And then I put down white paper underneath. That way you can see, or I can see, the paints that I'm using. So it worked out really great. And then I cover that completely in plastic so that the entire tabletop is my palette. I can, put paint wherever I want, and it's super convenient for me. So here I've moved along. I've got different sizes and shapes. So even when I'm working small like this, I like to make sure that I'm thinking about composition in terms of the sizes and shapes of the elements within my painting. So as you can see on the left side, I've got those 4 larger light green. Right now I'm making some teal-ish colored smaller marks. Over more towards the right bottom, I've got some horizontal lines. Those tend to represent my love for stepping stones. And now I'm just kind of filling in, and I'm still using that same brush, which is the rigger or the script brush, and I love painting with it as well. So filling in areas. And the reason I love using it is because it kind of jumps over some areas so that you can still see what was underneath in some places. Whoops, I kind of leaned forward there. I was probably adjusting myself in the chair that I was sitting in. Or, let's see, I'm usually talking with friends via Zoom, so I may have been trying to look at my computer screen to see what they were showing me. So there again, I flipped the brush around and I used the other end to scratch into that wet paint. So I was busy talking about other things, and I didn't mention, so if you look at my colors up above, I created kind of a darker green. I really love that dark green that I used right about in the middle of the page. And now I'm coming in with some lighter colors. So I'm looking at values as well when I'm creating. Not so much in the beginning. I just kind of get some colors down in the beginning, but definitely more towards the end, I start looking at values right away, looking for really light areas and really dark areas. So that's why I was pointing out that dark green that I created, because that, in addition to the black, most of which gets covered up, in addition to the black, I wanted another dark area. And then I've got plenty of lighter areas now. And sometimes I'll dip right into the white, but I actually have some color on my brush most of the time, unless, like just there, I wanted to do more of a pure white, so I cleaned my brush off. So filling in with some white, and then also making some marks with the white, adding some variety in that way. And again, scratching right into that wet, you can see that there was something underneath. You can see those darker areas. And to me, I just love that. I think it just adds so much more interest. Now, in addition to the, all these different greens that I'm using, I totally forgot until I got towards the end, oh, hello, I can just make a gray. because of course black and white makes gray. So I came in there and I made a little bit of gray as well. I love using gray as a neutral. I think it's a wonderful neutral, especially if you add just a tinge of whatever color you're using as well, and that helps harmonize that. Wow, my head's really leaning in there. So touching up the areas that are light, going back over them another time. And the reason I do that is because when I go over it with white just once, sometimes it still shows through. You could tell that it's just one layer. So I'd like to come in and make it more opaque. And so that's what I'm doing here, is just adding another layer. And going right over those dots again one more time, darken them up in white. Now, if you've been watching my videos, you know that I have a love for fields of flowers, and that is what I create every time I'm putting down paint and mark making. So all of those symbols are representing something in nature that I love. So like those dots right there are a grouping of flowers for me. I mentioned before the stepping stones, a lot of the circles, and like the open circles I'm making and the closed circles, those all represent flowers to me. My abstract view of flowers. So as I mentioned in the beginning, I don't normally work with a limited palette or monochromatic color scheme, but sometimes when I do, I just totally fall in love with it. And this is a great example. I just totally fell in love with these colors. And there I lightened up those dots towards the bottom there because I felt they were competing with the dots that were, the larger dots that were up in the upper left area. So I just lightened them up by using my paper towel to pick up some of that paint. And one more time, I'm holding the dryer and filling in and drying at the same time. You can tell I'm a total impatient painter. I like everything to be dry so I can move on to the next layer right away. And there I'm going to darken up those round circles again because that first layer didn't make it very dark. Now I use gesso, which isn't super opaque as opposed to white paint. I'm just used to using gesso. I love using it. I've been using it for years as my white, so I'm kind of used to it. I know the limitations of it. I do have white paint, believe it or not. I'm not sure if I have it in this studio or my other studio, but I rarely use it. I'm just so used to using my gesso. All right, so I've dried that and I'm just going to curl back that page a little bit. Some of these pages got stuck together because my paint seeps down and I was separating out those pages. So it is dry, and I usually rub my hands over it because I seem to always have little nubs of paint sticking out, and I just remove those because it helps me when I come back in with mark making. So we're at my final stage here, and because I'm using a limited palette, I am also using a limited palette on this final stage with only colors that are like the colors that I've been using. Now, if you think back to my first stage where I just put down a bunch of marks, I did those in some warm colors, and you can see those in this final piece, and I love that. Just a little touch of some warm colors to add an accent. Here I'm going to try to zoom in so that you guys could see a little bit better of my final mark making. I got to wipe down some of that wet paint. All right, this is a better view here since it's such a small piece and I'm creating small marks. So again, I like to start with a pencil when I do my final mark making. And unlike my mark making in the beginning, which is very loose and free and I don't even think about what I'm doing, with my final mark making, it's much more intentional. So I'm looking at, how do I add those final marks to add some interest to the piece? So here I put down those marks and I am actually looking for my eraser. It's just a standard eraser. Can't seem to figure out where I put it. And there it is. All right, so I used a grease pencil there, or a China marker. Didn't like it, so I just erased it. So keep that in mind. If you put down some marks and you don't like it, just erase it. You can do that with the China marker. You can do it with the Prismacolor pencils. You can even do it with the crayons. I have done that before where I didn't like what I put down and I just got the eraser out and erased it. Here I'm using a Prismacolor pencil and just putting some final marks. You could tell it's my favorite pencil. Look how short it's getting. I think I've got a larger one somewhere. And then here's the white China marker again. Sometimes I fill in wherever I had white before. Sometimes I'll come back in and fill that in a little bit more. Here's an example where I just took that similar green and filled it in. Another China marker in black this time, and I like coming in and just adding a little bit more black here and there, and I'll rub it in some places that gives it a little bit more of a painterly look, kind of softens the edges a bit. I don't do that everywhere, but sometimes I'll do it here and there. And usually the black is already peeking through a little bit, and I might just come in and add just a little bit more to it. All right, so that's it. This one came together very quickly. Although I did speed up the video, I think you can still see how it came together. See how I love where it is peeking through? You can see some of those reds from my very first layer. And you can see more reds coming across here. Again, just an accent color. And scratching through the little circles there. You can definitely see texture, those marks every which way. I love that. I love that green also, softer green. Here's the bottom portion. You can see my little tick marks in a pencil that I used, just a standard pencil. And then where I erased the white marks, I made these teal marks with a Prismacolor pencil. And that's a Prismacolor pencil down there as well. And mark making with a regular pencil. And yummy texture. All right, I'm going to also have a photo for you, I think, here at the very end. And I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, give me a thumbs up. Please leave a comment below. That helps me a lot, being able to get this to show to a lot of other folks. And I really appreciate you being here. Feel free to ask me questions. I'm happy to answer those. And remember, down below, I'll have a link to all of the things that I talked about, and you can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe here if you haven't done so already. And remember to hit the bell so that you're notified next time I have a video. All right, folks, wishing you a super fabulous and creative day.